Alright guys, welcome back to another video. We're starting the Vertigo 2 tail boom, and we might also combine the nose or nose pod in this as well. I'm using my phone because I left my other camera at home, but I think it'll work just fine. So I've already kind of just done some very basic steps here. The boom comes with the push rods installed already, so you don't have to worry about that. And there's ball links on this end. This is a V-tail. I forgot to mention that at the start, but this is a V-tail. So this is going to look different back here than the X-tail, but the servo arrangement will be very similar. And so what I've done initially, I have some familiarity, can't say that word, with this layout for the Vertigo booms. So I know that the servos like to be a little off the base of the boom here. So I use these 3D printed frames that I have that are spaced up a little bit. You can use whatever frame you like, but just know that lifting the servos up slightly will work out better because we're going to be using very short arms because the arms on the V-tails are very short. So having the servo all the way stuck to the base without lifting it up will either you'll use real long arms and the servos will barely move, or you're going to torque these down a lot like that. They are going to get bent down slightly, but not too bad. And to kind of prep for that, the pushrod sleeve is glued all the way basically to the stop here, to the end. And they use some kind of a goop or silicone kind of glue. So I just got a flathead and just pried the pushrod off the wall a little bit, both sides. Broke some of that glue loose so I can get a little flexibility out of these. And then once everything's done, I'll go back and put a drop of something, some kind of flexible glue on there at the final stages. So anyway, I've tacked these frames in already just with a couple of drops of CA. We're gonna go back and epoxy those, but what I'm gonna do now is start working on the linkage that hooks up to the servos here. I believe the kit comes with some little ball links. I like L-bends because it allows me to run a very short servo arm and still get and not get any binding with anything. So we're going to use some stainless steel couplers and L-bends. So first couple steps is going to be making sure the arms are perpendicular on the servos, and then getting the tails hooked up and connected to the push rods, centering the elevators, and then we can start marking things and cutting the push rods for our linkage. I have applied some epoxy to the servo frames and that's cured up, so we're basically ready to move on and get our push rods hooked up. The tails are on and centered, so we can proceed with marking and cutting the carbon push rods. And what I've done is prepared some 1.5 millimeter steel rod with L-bends and some stainless couplers. And you can see the slots I cut in there and the couplers just to give the resin more surface to bite on. I've also ground some slots into the L-bends on both sides and scuffed those up with 80 grit sandpaper. So those are ready to go, and I'm using single-sided arm with these X08s, and I've drilled the first two holes out to 1.5 millimeters. I think I'm going to end up using the shortest position here, closest to the screw, but I'll go ahead and leave myself both those options just in case, and we will cut down this arm later, but for now I'll just leave it as is. So I'm going to get those arms mounted perpendicular to the servos, and then I'm going to mark the carbon rods where I need to cut them, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut them. The servos are all installed, and I have my L-bends hooked up to the arms, and I don't know if you can see this little tiny gold mark there I made with a paint pen. But I've marked both locations where I need to cut them, so I'm going to go ahead and trim off the bits I don't need, and then we'll put a little couple of slots or gouges in the carbon and scuff up the ends, and we'll basically be ready to bond up the L-bends to the push rod. So here's our couplers and our L-bends basically done. I have epoxy applied on them, and I'm just waiting for that to cure up, so we won't touch it for a day. And I just have the tail boom set up on the bench here, and we'll just leave it alone. So while we wait for the boom to cure up, I'm going to go ahead and start the nose. Very similar construction to the original Vertigo, so you get two plates. This is a battery plate, and this is a receiver plate. And the way it goes, so the nose is this way. So the smaller cutout, or the narrower one, this tapers down, goes towards the front. And this kind of sits well towards the bottom of the fuselage. And I'm going to keep it fairly centered, so front to back. I'm going to keep it fairly centered under the canopy, because the battery is going to end up going kind of right under the canopy. We're going to have motor and speed control here, so I don't really want to push that too far forward. And then the receiver tray mounts with the kind of narrower opening. See this kind of big U-shaped opening here, narrower, sharper one here. The narrower one goes towards the nose, and that gets mounted back here up, right? Because the receiver is going to sit on here something like this, and we don't need a whole lot of room for the receiver, so you can kind of space it according to your receiver. But the idea here is when these are installed, they're going to overlap each other like this, and they'll get epoxied in, and the overlapping portions are going to provide a lot of rigidity to the fuselage. It's going to make this way stronger, so I highly recommend you guys do this. I know with the original Vertigo, I saw a lot of guys omit these parts and end up breaking their fuselages on hard landings. I never had a problem with that with all the Vertigos that I flew, and I still have. Yeah, so it's just going to make this part of the fuselage way stronger with that top receiver mount, and it's going to make this part of the fuselage really rigid. So yeah, please install them. Okay, so in preparation, I have scuffed the edges with coarse sandpaper, both pieces, and I actually used a cutoff wheel and put some notches on the edges on both pieces, just to give that resin something to bite into. I've scuffed the fuselage with coarse sandpaper, and I put some coarse sandpaper, I glued some onto a dowel, and I used the dowel to sand the fuselage walls on the inside, somewhere around here, because the back of this guy goes near the bolts, so you need to sand all the way from there to there. And then I cleaned everything up with alcohol and some paper towels, and we're kind of ready to position things and get it glued in. I like to use like spot welds basically with CA, like just 1, 2, 3, 4 tacks, hold it in place. Same with this guy, and then go back and use epoxy on top of that. I got these plates tacked into place. You can see my battery tray is tacked in 4 spots, and I have the receiver plate up here, and you can see how much those overlap. So I kind of have the end of the receiver plate in line with the back riv nut that's going to act as a ballast hold down, because we're going to be able to put ballast under here and screw it into that. And this forward one's supposed to be for a battery hold down, but I just always put Velcro here, and I never use this. So that's that. And if we zoom in here, we can see the back of that receiver tray, and it kind of goes all the way back behind that nut. So it's very, very long in there. So that's all good. Here's my receiver, and I'll just give you an idea of how that's going to look. It's going to go up here like that. Could be a little further back, whatever. And then I'm going to run my antennas. Probably put a hole somewhere around there, and they'll come out like that on the side of the fuselage on both sides. So we're going to get some epoxy mixed up and get a nice bead of epoxy down everything and let this cure. Okay, so we're all epoxied up. So you have some nice beads of epoxy on both parts. Can't really see all the way down there, but the epoxy is in there. So we're just going to let this cure. And I mixed this epoxy kind of a little bit on the runny side. It does have a little bit of Cabicil, but not a whole lot. Because I kind of wanted it to settle down into those grooves we cut with the cutoff wheel. So that's why I did that, and I used a long carbon pushrod trimming to get all the epoxy in place, especially back here. You know, you can reach in here, and you can also reach in from this hole. So I'm going to prop up the fuselage upright like this and let it cure, and that epoxy will settle a little bit and kind of bite into those grooves, and it should be nice and strong for us. My resin is dry on my trays, and the fuselage is now really stiff. It feels great. Next thing I'm going to do is glue in a motor mount. So I'm going to be using the CCM 30mm motor mount. It's a multi, so it'll fit a bunch of different motors. I'll be using an Xpower, and it just about fits, but there's little thickness on the top and bottom of the fuselages here, where the layers of material overlap. So I'm going to use the Dremel with the drum sander and work on that a little bit so I get a nice fit with my motor mount. So you can see where I sanded and scuffed the fuselage, and I did a little bit of grinding on the seams to get rid of that overlap, and now my mount fits really well. I don't know if I could do this one-handed, but let's give it a shot. Whoop. There we go. Super cool. So just mix up some epoxy and we'll glue it in, and I'm going to apply the epoxy on the fuselage, not the mount, and then push the mount in, and it fits real tight, so I don't even think we'll need tape or anything to hold it in. But yeah, one more thing done. So there's the mount installed. Came out nice and clean, and we'll just wait for the resin to dry, but we can turn our attention back to the boom. So on the boom, our couplers are attached. The epoxy's dry. It's a couple days later. Everything came out really well. I went ahead and glued in this little block right here. It's just a scrap piece of plastic from something I 3D printed. You could use wood or anything really. And all that is just something to prevent the L-bend from popping out of the servo arm. So this doesn't actually really touch it, it just kind of slides by it, but it prevents this from going that way. And I also have one right here. You can see that right there, and you can see that it doesn't really touch. So it's not putting any drag on that guy there. And the next thing I'm going to do is trim down our arms. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and use maybe my square to make sure my servos are completely perpendicular. So I might put this square on the servo somehow. And since the arm is real long, it'll be easy to tell if the servo horn is perpendicular to the servo, and I can program these with my KST servo programmer to fine-tune everything. Basically done with the boom assembly. Servos are screwed down. I cut the arms down and sanded them a little bit. You see, and I left myself that one hole just in case I need more throw, but I don't think I'll ever use it. So we are using very tiny servo arms or horns. Have the little blocks glued in to keep the push rods, L-bends in place. Servos are screwed down, and I did put a drop of silicone on the push rod sleeves, about here and here, so that I kind of dislodge them, if you remember, from the fuselage sides, so I can get them to bend down to reach the servo arms. And with everything hooked up as you see it here, I went back and just put one drop of silicone on the sleeves just to stiffen the push rods up a little bit. So super happy with that. Yeah, that basically completes the boom. We are going to probably tie these leads together into a 4-pin Deans. So we'll probably end up shortening these wires, and we'll use a Deans connector somehow to make hooking up the boom to the nose easier. Well, I just wanted to kind of wrap up the boom portion of the Vertigo 2 build. I did a little bit more work. I cut the servo wires down a little shorter, so I probably took maybe 2.5 inches off them. And you can see the new connectors here. And then I made a little tiny sub harness that goes to this 4-pin connector. This isn't a Deans, it's one of the connectors that comes with the kit that they suggest you use on the wingtips. And since I didn't use those, I just went ahead and used one here because I ran out of 4-pin Deans. Otherwise, you can use a 4-pin Deans if you like. So this little sub harness goes to the connector, and the connector is epoxied in to the boom. And I put this little kind of capture plate over it. You can see it's at an angle that matches the boom. And I just used one of the sticks that comes with the kit. This is like a battery hold down stick. The kit comes with 2 of them. I never use these. They're meant to kind of screw down to these threaded inserts, and your battery would be there. But I just put some Velcro for the battery, so I sacrificed that. That's what I used to make this. This is held on with epoxy, and the plug is also held on with epoxy. And then attached to that we have the harness that's going to go to the receiver. And I used 26 gauge wire for the plus minus, the power, and then 28 gauge wire for the signals. And as you can see, I have one signal wire for one of the servos, so my plus minus are combined on this side of this little tiny sub harness. And we put the fuse spy here. I kind of line up where it's going to go. I just made sure that I had plenty of room here to reach the receiver, because the receiver is going to sit in right about there. So we got plenty of length on that. And I'll kind of show you what this looks like when the thing slid in. With the boom onto the pod, you can see that's kind of where everything lines up. There's plenty of room in here to reach your fingers in and attach that, so this wire will just be loose and hanging in here. In the past with the Vertigo 1s, I have done complete plug and play, and you can certainly do that. You just got to glue this to something. You guys know the drill, but for this guy, I'm just trying to keep it fairly light. So that basically finishes the fuselage. Mostly, I still have to do the wiring for the wing. These are some of the components I'm going to be using. So we have a Xpower Light motor. It's the 291512, and this weighs about 73 grams. And especially for the V-tail model, I've been told it's really important to use a light motor in the light model because of CG issues. So we're going with this guy. Then we have a CCM 30mm F5J spinner, which is super nice. And the CCM spinner comes with a white cone or a black cone, so you can pick whichever one you want. And then we have a Dualsky Summit 60 ESC with a 8-volt BEC. I've kind of bundled these wires up to make it a little more compact. So I'll go like that. And then we have this Jetty 7-channel receiver, and I'll be using the Jetty X bus or EX bus or whatever they call it along with this. And then CCM 10x6 F5J props. And I think this combination of prop and spinner is going to fit this fuselage beautifully, but I'll just try to get them dry fit and we'll see how the props fold back. Alright, so I got the blades on the spinner, and the spinner's not tightened down, but it's a pretty good fit, I would say. Overall, pretty happy with that. So there we go. Yeah, so I think that basically wraps up the fuse and the boom build. I am going to shorten this wire down a little bit, so I only need it to go to about there, and it's pretty thick gauge wire. And then I'm going to peel back this programming lead, like probably all the way back to here, because we don't need it that long. And yeah, that's about it. So hope you guys found this video helpful, and I will go over some things on the model when I get the wing wiring done. So yeah, I guess basically I'll do another video about the wing wiring and the X bus, or you know, how I get along with setting up the Jetty with the EX bus or whatever they call it. But for now, it's gonna do it. So I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.